I'm very honored to have the pleasure to introduce Fern Mallis. Many of us have met her throughout the last 3 days. She is a New Yorker through and through. She's a straight shooter. What you see is what you get with Fern, but she has a heart of gold, and when she embraces you, she takes you in wholeheartedly. She embraces the region, and she has a true passion for emerging design. She has spent the last several years, after stepping down as Senior Vice President of IMG and running New York Fashion Week, traveling to emerging markets and helping advise on how to take emerging market fashion and designers to the next level. I don't want to take too long speaking because we're here to see Fern, so without further ado, I'd like to welcome Fern Mallis to the stage.
A terrific pleasure for me to be back in Dubai with all of you this evening, and at Dubai's Fashion Forward, and to talk about fashion weeks. I thank you very much for the invitation to be here, and I thank you for your terrific hospitality here in Dubai. I really wish I didn't have to get on this plane. I would have loved to have more time to go back to the Dubai Mall and shop a little more. It's the first time I've been to a country like this, and it's not the first time I'm here, but the first time I'm not going back with some designers' clothes from this market, so that's killing me. And it's also so cold in New York, it would have been nice to spend some time in the sun here. It has been about 6 years since my last of 2 trips here, and it's clear that the building and growth in Dubai hasn't ever stopped, and I guess it probably never will. After creating Fashion Week in New York, just over 20 years ago, I'm now enjoying all of the babies, the siblings, the relatives that have been born since then, all over this country and around the world. Sometimes I feel like I was fashion's Johnny Appleseed, dropping pins and fabric with lots of love and passion, watering the designers, models, hairstylists, makeup artists, event producers, lighting designers, DJs, PR and marketing people, dedicated volunteers, and many generous sponsors, and sometimes an enlightened government. And voila, Fashion Week started to sprout. I guess with a name like Fern, it was inevitable. It's all about a green thumb. And by the way, green is next fall's color on the international fashion scene. And maybe it's also the color of money, so let's hope that's a forerunner of what to expect. Can anyone guess how many fashion weeks there are in the world? 57? 257? Somebody else? Okay. 83. All right, interesting. Do you know of an editor in New York, Mickey Boardman from Paper Magazine? Yes. Good. Well, Mickey was quoted in an article saying, "I really want to do a book, and I'd call it It's Always Fashion Week Somewhere in the World." And Mickey would know because he gets invited to many of them. Well, the last time I think someone actually did count them was in a New York Times article in 2008. And at that time, it said 152. So I went online and did some research, and I added up what I could find. And believe it or not, it's about 400. That means there really could be a fashion week every week of the year, and then some, somewhere and everywhere. So besides the obvious ones in New York, Paris, Milan, and London, there are fashion weeks in, and I'll have to tell you some of these because you won't believe it, but I'm not going to read all 400. There is Rio, Sao Paulo, and 5 more in Brazil, Hong Kong, Beijing, Shanghai, and 5 others in China. Japan has 8, including Tokyo. Seoul, Sri Lanka, Antwerp, Copenhagen, Oslo, Stockholm, Berlin, and 7 others in Germany, from Dusseldorf to Munich. Poland, Malta, Amsterdam, Rome, and 8 more cities in Italy. Fiji, Colombia has 5 weeks, as does Mexico. Buenos Aires, Liberia, New Zealand, Madrid, Barcelona, and 6 others in Spain. Lisbon, Nassau, Aruba, Mumbai, Delhi, and 5 other cities in India. 2 in Bangladesh. Sydney, Melbourne, Moscow, Zurich, Toronto, Montreal, and 6 others in Canada. Istanbul, Lahore, Karachi, and 4 more in Pakistan. Lebanon, Jakarta, Kuala Lumpur, Tbilisi, Mongolia. Tel Aviv, Cape Town, Johannesburg, Durban, and 2 more in South Africa. Kyrgyzstan, Kazakhstan, and Zimbabwe. And now in the Middle East, here in Dubai, Bahrain, Jeddah, Oman, Riyadh, I'm saying that wrong, Riyadh, and maybe more. This list gives credence to something Simon Doonan, the creative ambassador of Barney's in New York, once said: "I want to be the fashion editor of National Geographic." And back home in my USA, besides New York, there's Brooklyn Fashion Week, New Jersey and Atlantic City, Boston, Baltimore, and Maryland Fashion Week, St. Louis, Portland, Washington, Tampa Bay, Miami, Savannah, Charleston, Los Angeles, Orange County, Chicago, Cleveland, and Nashville, Tennessee, where I just was last week before getting on a plane to Dubai. Is there that much talent in the world to support these events? Maybe, although I seriously doubt it. But you never know where the next fashion star will come from. I've always said that the best editors and retailers are like pigs sniffing for truffles. Somehow, if the talent exists, they will find it. It's all about talent and bringing something new to the table, and it's about timing. And that next talent just might be here in Dubai. And that is one of the best reasons why fashion weeks matter. So what do all these weeks have in common? Besides a runway and bleachers and seating risers and lighting trusses and mirrors and lounges, they all have people who are passionate, who love fashion, love discovering and sharing talent. Really, who doesn't love watching beautiful women wearing beautiful clothes parading back and forth on a runway? These weeks also have people in every one of their cities who sews, designs, and dreams. They all have organizers who can stage events, and that includes the producers, the lighting and sound designers, the carpenters and graphic designers, the florists and the caterers, and of course the models and stylists, the dressers, hair and makeup stylists, security guards, and they all have dedicated volunteers as you have here. They all have photographers and editors and journalists and bloggers, local and international, buyers who work in stores or e-commerce sites, and then there are the guests who live, love, and buy and wear fashion, socialites and celebrities, and here in the UAE, royal families. And now they mostly all have sponsors, from cars and couriers to energy drinks, shampoos, and mobile phones. And what they all have become is entertainment, spectacles, and media events. But they are also a business. And in today's new world, they've become content. So with so many fashion weeks, do they matter? I think it's important for each of these fashion weeks to ask 3 critical questions. Who is this week for? What do we want to accomplish? And how do we define its success? Can you answer all of those satisfactorily to your participants, partners, team, and your audience? And mind you, the answers aren't necessarily the same in every city. Fashion weeks create opportunities and create jobs for a huge amount of people. They create news and buzz, and they do generate revenue in stores, in ads, in bars, in hotels, restaurants, and in most cities, at Starbucks. I have one important question for you. Who here has bought something new to wear this week, even a new lipstick? See, mission accomplished already. Most people think bringing the Olympics, or in Dubai's case, Expo 2020, to their city, is the best way to generate revenue and make an impact. I kind of have to differ. It takes years to create an Olympic bid, and I suspect the Expo bid, and millions of dollars to enter the competition. If you're lucky enough to win, that's when the real work begins and the billion-dollar budgets kick in to create infrastructure, venues, transportation, new airports and roads, hotels, and so forth. Although I have to say, if anybody can pull that off and build all that really quickly, it is Dubai. All of this for an Olympics is really just for 2 weeks. At least for Expo, I believe it's 6 months. But then good luck booking all the venues and keeping up that momentum. Fashion Week is much easier. Comes every year, in some cities twice a year. And the people are much prettier and dress a whole lot better. Clearly, I'm a big fan of Fashion Weeks. I organized and created New York's Fashion Week in Bryant Park in 1993. It was originally called 7th on 6th. And that was because 7th Avenue is the generic name of the fashion industry in New York, just like Wall Street means finance. And we moved the fashion shows to Bryant Park, which was on 6th Avenue. And that was a time when most of the people who now come and cover it, if they were born, they were probably in diapers. And I ran it until the tents, as they came to be called, moved out of Bryant Park to Lincoln Center in 2010. Is there anyone here who hasn't heard the story of how, or should I say why, Fashion Week came to be in New York? You've all heard the story? You all know it? Okay. I'm going to take a sip of water and I'm going to tell you. Back in 1991, I threw my hat in the ring when I heard that the CFDA, the Council of Fashion Designers of America, was looking for a new executive director. The office at that time was about the size of maybe half of this platform that I'm standing on. It was in a back corridor in a building on Broadway, but it sounded like it could be an interesting job, and that job became available after the CFDA did its first big, huge AIDS benefit, which was called 7th on Sale, which is really why 7th on 6th got named what it got. And it was at a time when the fashion industry was decimated by AIDS in New York and everywhere else in the country, and just starting to have its effect around the world. And after this big AIDS benefit called 7th on Sale, which was turning a huge armory building in New York into a store for 4 days, every designer had a little booth, beautifully designed, selling all of their clothes at wholesale and below prices, with every designer manning their booths. And that event, which raised $5 million over a weekend for the cause, depleted the CFDA's office. The president was a designer named Carolyn Rome, and she decided she had it and she couldn't stay in the position. The young man who was an executive director who worked for many years out of Perry Ellis's office, his contract wasn't renewed, and so CFDA was looking for a new director. I kept reading about that in Women's Wear Daily, and I had just left a job in the interior furnishings architecture world running a huge design center. I'd had a 20-year career at that point, very successful, in fashion, being director of a department store, an editor at Condé Nast magazine, Mademoiselle at the time, and a public relations business for many years in the design universe. And I threw my hat in the ring. I was asked to come in after my resume was sent to the CFDA, and literally like 10 minutes after they got it. And I came in, they had already picked their 5 finalists, and I became the 6th. And I met with Calvin Klein and Bill Blass and 2 other designers, and they, said to me, well, why should we hire you? You haven't been in fashion in 10 years. And I said, I never stopped wearing clothes. And so that worked. And then I said, and I never stopped shopping, and I never stopped looking at magazines. And fashion was in my blood. I grew up in a family who worked in the garment center, in the industry in New York, all my uncles and my dad. And so I loved that business. Long story short, they said, we need you to come back. We think we want to hire you to the next big board meeting. And the CFDA board meeting was at a table that was about the length of this platform. And it was Oscar de la Renta and Bill Blass and Ralph Lauren and Donna Karan and Calvin Klein and every famous American name designer you could imagine. This was now the 3rd meeting I had with them, stressing out constantly about what to wear to each of these meetings. And I was queried and quizzed and challenged by lots of people at that table about the job and what I'd be doing and my dedication to it. And eventually they said, okay, we need to deliberate and wait in the reception area and so on and so forth. I came back to that table and the entire CFD board sang happy birthday to me. It was my birthday that day. A very memorable moment in my life, and I was the new executive director. I did not start immediately. This was the end of March. I was starting a few weeks later in April to get all of my other obligations tied up. And that was the week that there was Fashion Week, or Market Week as it was called in New York. And at that time, if there were 50 designers, they were showing in 50 different spaces in New York. Nobody talked to each other. There was no organization. Michael Kors had a show in an empty loft space in Chelsea, raw concrete space, which designers love raw concrete spaces. And you know from the sound of the music in these shows, when the bass music goes on, it's very loud. And if something's not nailed down, it kind of shakes. Well, at this show, the ceiling shook, and the plaster started coming down on the runway. On top of Cindy, Naomi, Linda, Claudia, all the one-name supermodels of the era. They brushed their shoulders. They get paid the big bucks. They deserve it. They kept walking. Every editor there did not remember any of the clothes. They were just looking where the emergency exits were. And Susie Menkes in the front row and the fashion editor of the New York Times got chunks of plaster in their laps. The next day, they wrote articles that said, "We live for fashion, we don't want to die for it." And I said, I think my job description just changed. And it became my mission to organize, centralize, and modernize the American runway shows, to find safe, sound places. That next season, also, Isaac Mizrahi had a show in an empty loft down in Soho. And it was in a loft space on the second or third floor, 8 o'clock at night, 9 o'clock at night. If you had a ticket to get to Isaac's show, you got in there and you didn't budge. Well, of course, it was filled up with 1,200 people, and the power blew. Generators were dead, pitch black, but nobody budged. It was the days when everybody was smoking and all the power backup generators were not there, because the lighting designer had gone on to another show, which Isaac still can't believe. And eventually, backup generators came in. So we really needed to, this was not professional for the American designers to have these kind of conditions. Editors were trapped in elevators at 557th Avenue going to Donna and Donna's show in the middle of floors. You know, they missed shows. So that became my mission. And we were a very tiny office, myself and an assistant, hired a couple of freelancers. And that summer also, in 1992, was when New York City hosted the Democratic National Convention, which is when we nominate our candidates to run for president. That summer, that was the year that Bill Clinton was nominated to run for president. And every industry in New York rose to the occasion to do something that week. The museums, the theaters. We were fashion. We said we'd put on a fashion show. We did it in Central Park in a big tent. Every designer came and showed up with 2 models wearing their clothes. All the delegates and press were there. And at the end of the show, all of them walked down the runway with their models, all the names I've mentioned, plus Isaac and Diane von Furstenberg and Nicole Miller and Anna Swee and Todd Oldham and Tommy Hilfiger, everybody of the day. At the end of the show, they all stood on the lawn with me and looked at the tent and said, "Is this what you're talking about, a tent like this?" And I said, "Exactly." I was then given a blessing to go to Paris and Milan. I came back with 1 million pictures and a head full of information from that fall and said, "We have to do this. It's America's time. You guys are missing out on showing your collections in a proper environment the way they are in Paris and Milan." And I came back and created 7th on 6th and started dialing for dollars to make it happen. Called Evian, in fact, who you have here, was our first sponsor who came on board. They were looking to brand water in America. It was before they had 30 bottles of water on the shelves. And the next call was to Anna Wintour at Vogue, and she said, "How much money do you need?" And I said, "I think $500,000. And she said, "I'll get back to you." And she's called Cy Newhouse. She said, "I'll call Cy and get back to you." And she does that. She's very efficient. And she called back and said, "I'll give you $100,000. I said, "I'll take it." I called the president of Hearst and I said, "Anna's giving us $100,000 for Vogue." He said, "Okay, Bazaar, I'll give you $100,000. I called the president of Hachette and I said, "Vogue and Bazaar are giving us $100,000. He said, "Elle will give you $100,000. And then Hearst called back and said, "We want Town and Country in." I said, "I'll take another 100. And it was a week in the office of ka-ching, ka-ching, ka-ching. Every time we made a call, it was like, yes, we got another one. Called Clairol, called my very first assistant who worked for me when I had a public relations business, who was now the director of prescriptives at Estee Lauder. And I said, "Janie, we need you. You're a young beauty brand." She said, "Okay." And she came on board. She's now the global president of Estee Lauder. And then I called, if you're stupid enough sometimes, I called the president of General Motors. You get on the phone and you just ask to speak to the president. They said, "Okay, they'll put you through." Today I probably would be terrified to do that for some reason, but I didn't mind it then. And spoke to the assistant and spoke to his secretary, and then they called back and said, they were fascinated by the idea, and we eventually closed General Motors as well as a sponsor. And all sorts of people fell into place, the New York Times, champagne, and all the things that help make a fashion week happen. You have to have champagne. And that's how Fashion Week started. In the fall of 1993 was our first shows in Bryant Park. There's actually a documentary movie called The Tents, which can be rented, I think, on Netflix still, which tells that whole story, and it's a nice piece about what happened in the park. And I always say it does take a village, as Hillary Clinton has written, but it's a very cool village. And as I said, it was America's time to properly compete and level the playing field. I was lucky to be in the right place at the right time and was able to make it all happen. I could never have dreamed that this common sense business initiative would have grown to the degree it has, and how fashion has now exploded, and the changes that have occurred since digital film became the norm, and the best accessories became smartphones and iPads, and the phenomena of blogging, posting, pinning, liking, linking, tumbling, tweeting, Instagramming, and social media took over and became the measure of our lives and our work. But I can take credit for creating an event that clearly was a game changer, and one that I know inspired many ambitious and creative entrepreneurs to create something just like it in their cities and countries, and for being the first to embrace corporate sponsors and partners for fashion. And I'm extremely proud of the fact that New York Fashion Week brings into the city approximately $865 million, and it's New York's most successful event, generating more revenue for our city than the US Open Tennis Tournament. I do take pride also in the many careers that have been launched on those runways in front of house and backstage behind the scenes, and the many careers surrounding the production of the shows, from models to photographers, caterers to videographers. When I left IMG Fashion after the last season of the shows in Bryant Park in the spring of 2010, before the tents moved uptown to Lincoln Center, I got a letter that I treasure from a man whose company shoots 95% of all the runway videos. And he wrote, "Hey Fern, after seeing you and celebrating closure with everybody Thursday night," which was a party that I had insisted we do to close the Bryant Park tents and properly salute the history that we had created there. He continued, that I was left with an unexpectedly emotional reaction from what came up for me as a result of focusing my thoughts on all these years in the tents. I want to share some of them with you. Whatever goes down from this moment on, nothing can alter or remove the accomplishment that you have spearheaded in the past and what you have already done. Putting this all together will continue to reverberate positively, impacting so many people's lives. Of course, before the tents, my company had an established client base in the fashion niche, but the consolidation of the shows enabled us to grow exponentially. And then so much more work started growing out of all these relationships that germinated from doing the shows. All of a sudden, our client base grew, and work with them in between show season grew as well. So in some way, the life I have now, the lives of my children, in terms of how I've been able to provide for them, the lives of my staff, and enormous numbers of freelancers, and the people in their lives have all been positively impacted in some way by your actions. And Fern, realize that we are just one very small corner of the business of fashion in the center. Imagine this applying to everybody from sample makers to security guys to fashion students. It's a huge chunk of the piece of the universe. So I say to all of you here, and a part of Dubai Fashion Forward, carve out your chunk of the universe and keep going forward. It's clear to me that you have all learned much from the best around the world and are on the way to creating a world-class fashion week. But be patient. There's growing pains to go through. It's all about timing. But create one that also respects your culture and your tradition while embracing the rest of the world. Nothing is more important than staying true to your heritage. Don't compare yourself to other fashion weeks or ask how you measure up to New York or other international fashion weeks. Here in Dubai, you have the added advantage of many people who care about what's happening here and wanting to help develop it. There is talent here, and there are customers here, and there is more than enough business to be done here. The Middle East is one of the international fashion industry's most vibrant markets, with $8 billion in personal luxury goods spending here, despite any economic crisis. A third of the world's couture clients are from the Middle East. The world's fashion brands are not only courting you, they are here. So that's a very unique place to be. So I say enjoy it and have a good time. It's a growing process, but you are in the right place at the right time. And you do have many of the right people on your side and on your team. From Bon Guerrero and all his team at Fashion Forward, to Dr. Amina Di Rustamani and her team spearheading Design District, and with the input and guidance from all the guests that you invite here, from every aspect of the industry, from around the world, like Carmela and others who've spoken here this week, and myself. So take advantage of that. Learn from that, listen to that, absorb that. But have fun while you're doing it. Have fun creating and moving Dubai fashion forward. Otherwise, it's absolutely not worth it. And while you're busy going forward, as Ritu said, be nice. Please be nice. It's my mantra, and I know that resonated at the beginning of the week because I've seen it all over social media. And as she said, check your egos outside the door. Fashion Forward will only succeed if you all work together for a common goal and a common cause. And then you will be very pleasantly surprised at what the universe can deliver. Thank you.